Boy, at different times it's changed. You know, it's kind of growing up in Newark was an interesting thing. I am hearkening back to a Nicky Giovanni poem. When I was playing with Max, Nicky was really close, and he would do a lot of things with various poets in particular. So Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison and a bunch of other people. And Nicky did her last performance here before she passed. And she did it, you know, even though her partner was saying, no, don't, because she had chosen, she had cancer. And she has a wonderful poem. It's actually framed over there that she signed for me about living in a place and people's perception when you're not from that place. You know, the reality is, it was wonderful. You know, I grew up in Seth Boyden. It was great. I remember good things about Seth Boyden. People said, oh, you grew up in Seth Boyden. It's like, no. I remember spending time with my sister. I remember holidays. I remember all those things that were best about Newark. I wish I knew more about the history then. I knew a lot more about it now. There wasn't this flight to get away from Newark. You know, the South Ward was a place where your family was. It was a special place. It was a positive relationship, you know, with a community. There was a guy who had a barbershop a couple blocks away, and he taught chess and guitar. So I chose guitar. And at a certain point I wanted to read, so I figured out upright bass. I started going to Juilliard on Saturdays. I started meeting various people. I remember I went on the road when I was a teenager with Max Roach and Tito. And they came to mom and dad and said, is it okay to tour? You know, we'll take care of your kid. So all those memories are really positive for me. And, you know, when I think about music, I think about, you know, I was pleased to spend time with Quincy, a fair amount, that skinny Quincy. As opposed to the Quincy that I know that's like teddy bear Quincy. And he's like, you know, music is what you hear when you walk 3 blocks from your house. It's the rhythms, it's the words, it's the poetry. And through that, there is not anything genre specific. It's just those rhythms and those words that form expression of what you do as a musician. So that's what I get from Newark. And I think coming back, there's this joy of this evolution. There's this sadness of some loss. You know, when you look at people, it's not about the smooth surfaces that you like. It's about the rough parts. It's about the folds. It's about the journey. If the journey is smooth, it's kind of a boring journey. You know, it's like a jazz solo. If the jazz soloist doesn't feel like he's gonna like fall off the edge of the cliff because he's really stretching, then it's a boring solo. It's like owning a Lamborghini and driving at 30 miles an hour. You know, so part of that expression is linked to establishing the balance between risk and musicality.
And then so like as a little boy, like who were you listening to and who did you see perform?
Listen to everybody. I mean, it was I listened to a lot of jazz. I listened to a lot of Latin music. I listened to pop music. I turned on an album by Bruce Springsteen and Journey just as much as I turned on Weather Report or Miles Davis. Miles said at one point, and I think it's been attributed to a few other people, he goes, there's only two types of music, good music and that other shit, you know? So you try and give yourself as much good music as you can. Well, being a musician has always been helpful in speaking to other musicians, poets, dancers, whatever, because you're talking to them like you're one of them, as opposed to, you know, the guy. Being a bass player is an interesting thing because your whole gig is making other people sound better. It's not about being in front. Being a bass player is providing that net under the soloist, providing that groove, and subtly changing the music and driving the music where it should go. If someone's, playing 12 choruses and they only should have played 2, there's a way to get them to stop. And that's not a whole lot different than being a producer. Your job is to make people sound better. And so I always say being a bass player and being a producer, the same thing. I never was going to be the best bass player on the planet, but I could make other people sound better. So that's what doing that was. And it also was just getting sick of the fumes from the diesel fumes from buses and that kind of thing, being away from family, having a home base, and that security has always been helpful to me. And when I was out with people like Max, I was usually the person that solved problems. Brilliant people that I would never even assume to have had the chance to interact with. I've always been, even when I was younger, the person to solve problems. And for that reason, people, as I've gotten older, I've been able to pick the people that I want to solve problems for. So, if you look at that thing back there, that's from working with Michael Jackson. So I did his last concerts at Madison Square Garden, and he snuck into my hotel room and wrote that on my pillowcase. But and you can do that if you're Michael Jackson. Once people trust you and they know that you care as much as they care, they'll ride with you on that. So in retirement, I look at those people I want to play with, that I want to support, that I want to hold up. I'm going to be working on The Landing of the Mothership by George Clinton. Last show on the Essence Festival this year on the 6th of July, because he's from Newark. He's 84 years old. He deserves to have a We're having the same people who designed Beyonce's tour design a brand new 21st century mothership, and having a bunch of people come out of that mothership, including people like Tehsuan Glover is going to be Sir Nose Devoid of Funk. So he's going to do the I Will Not Dance, I Will Not Swim, and then he gets hit with a bop gun, and you see what is everything about Savion. We were having creative discussions of, do we call Savion or Misty Copeland? How do you look at artists who look at things differently all the time? Dealing with Tony Bennett and those duets recordings that, opened up new things for him, working with, with James Brown, and the arbiters of funk. I once asked him, what's your definition of funk? He said, it's a groove so righteous you don't tap your foot, you break your leg. Which is really good, because then you can talk to George and say, well, my funk kind of grooves over his funk. Kind of like a smoke type of thing. So I've been really privileged to be a bass player or a producer for a lot of people. And that's been what's made me happy, and that's one of the reasons I'm leaving now. I feel like I've done what I could do. I want to play bass more often. I'm going to be at Lincoln Center in May, doing a Latino version of Miles with, I play with a trio with Gil Gutierrez, and we'll have Ciro Baptista and John Faddis performing with us. Those are the things that make me happy. Doing a couple of things with Kendrick. Same type of thing. You just meet somebody and you go, he's ridden his bicycle to my house because he rides a bicycle. And he said, when I decide who I want to work with, I want people who operate within my same sphere of empathy, one, and I want them to be good at what they do. And so finding those people, I said, you're kind of looking for a bass player, aren't you? So I am not playing bass on stage with him, but I'm serving that same function.
Yeah. What was the bridge from going from bassist, musician to producer?
I was always good with numbers. I went to Mansfield, got a music business degree, and then I got a certificate from University of Pennsylvania to basically teaching people bass, and had my first internship at Carnegie Hall. Worked at Intar Hispanic Arts Center, dealt with a lot of fundraising and sponsorship, because not a lot of people wanted to do that, but actually it was a good way to move up. I started doing these programs way back when you had a telephone and you put it in a holster to get on the internet. We figured out we could do a concert with somebody at a 1,500 seat hall, and said, what if we tried charging people $2.99 to, hear it on the internet? And we did something with, I think it was Rod Stewart, and 7 million people did that. And we split the money with the artist. And that became AOL Live.
Okay.
So I got to know people like Dick Parsons. And when he became chair of the Apollo, he said, I need someone to be the CEO. Why don't you come up? And so I became the executive producer at the Apollo. It's a following passion thing. So I've been able to, I feel like I was a bass player at the Apollo, and all those great people that are there, as they say, all those great ghosts, and you had people at that point that, if Jeff Beck came into town, he's like, no, I got to play a gig there. Some of the folks who could make more money at other places because of the connection to brand. The Apollo is the second most well-known urban brand in the world, right after Motown. So when Mary J, East Harlem girl, and she would end on every tour at the Apollo, and her agent would always say, "You can make more money here or there." She goes, "No, I'm going home, going to the Apollo."
So, what is it that makes a venue more than a venue? What is it that makes a venue a home that artists want to claim, even if they're not from there?
The same thing that makes the venue a home for audiences. When John and I first came here 14, 15 years ago, whatever it was, they had built NJPAC as a Lincoln Center for New Jersey and the community of New Jersey. And they did things to reach community, don't get me wrong, but really looking at who is without community, and when you really delve in, you have to stop using broad statements like the Latino community. Are we talking the Mexican community, the Dominicans, and the Puerto Ricans, which is probably and for us, the Portuguese and Brazilians because of Newark and that community, and that's what we focused on, and did the same thing with urban communities, did the same thing with Indian communities and South Asian communities, South Korean. We were amongst the first people to do K-pop in the tri-state area, because at a certain point, people develop a sense of home. They feel like, oh, well, I see myself on stage, I see myself at the ushers, I see myself on the board of directors. So if I don't know where I'm going to go tonight, maybe I'll check out. And diversity isn't just good mission, it's good business. At the end of the day, we went from 200,000 people a year to over 700,000 people a year. We've gone from $20 million a year to $75 million a year. That was because we looked at those people who needed a sense of home, and the artists the same way. To go through the theater with Dougie Fresh and Slick Rick and Chuck D and say, I want you to play here, when there are other types of venues that people are taking them to. I said, no, your presence, is kind of back to the Miles quote, it's about excellence, and your presence here brings excellence to this venue. And at the same token, this venue gives excellence to you. Your job with an artist is to give them the tools to do their job the best. Make sure there's an audio system, a lighting system, that make sure there's a kindness as they walk backstage. It's not like, what are you doing here? You know, this is a classical place, or this is a dance place, or this is a whatever. This is like, we are just so honored to have you here. And that makes a difference. And then, if you can draw a lasting picture in their mind, take someone like John Leguizamo. We had worked on a piece called Latin History for Morons. And that piece was written because one of his children went to private school and was told, hey, you know, Latinos, all they do is take from this community. They've never given anything. You know, it's like in between, you know, Aztecs and now, you know, nothing has been done. So he researched and found key people who've really given to our country. It's the only play I've ever worked on that has a bibliography, you know, and he put it up. So he came and we taped it for HBO, and he spent hours with kids from the community, which was great for the kids, but even better for him and for the institution, because when he thinks about NJPAC, he thinks about the faces of those young people. I remember Chick Corea doing a show with him, and he goes, I got 10 minutes to talk to kids. He ended up spending 45 minutes about doing, you know, 6-2-5-1 turnarounds in, you know, in blues progressions and tritone substitutions. And he was in it, you know, and forever he remembered the faces of the kids that he spoke to. If you can make a difference when you show up, because half your world is showing up at venues, and I know this from touring, where they'll, you know, on your music stand, give you a little note and says, Newark, New Jersey. So you sit there and you're playing and you go, it's so great to be here tonight in Newark, New Jersey. So if you can make it an experience, you know, people like Wayne Shorter, when they came here, he talked to me forever about doing that when we named the street after him. And he got to speak to kids, and we did an electric night, and we did an acoustic night. I was with John Petitucci, his bass player, just last week, and we were talking about how special that was for him. And he talked to kids a little bit about music, probably spoke to them most about comics. He was a huge fan of comics. But if you can put a face in people's minds of a venue, whether they're an audience member or an artist, they say, I belong here. I have a sense of home. I have a sense of belonging. And that's exciting, because then when they have a new project, they'll say, why don't we go to NJPAC? You know, why don't we go to Newark? Aside from the fact that Newark is half the price to develop a new piece. And now with the building of the film studio, with new rehearsal studios that are coming up, a person can create something in Newark, they can tech it, they can tour it, they can film it, and they can do it at half the price of going across the river. So in a sense, it becomes an incubator for creativity. And while they're here, maybe we trade some space to have them talk to young people. We're big-time communists. You know, I'll give you X if you give me Y. And that's okay. And because it always comes back in a positive way. Make a positive experience, it grows. Longest answer to the shortest question.
You're reminding me of something Alan Watts said. He said the essence of life is play. So we don't do music, we don't work music, we play music. How does producing, especially at this scale and in this type of space, how do you play in your work today? How do you play when you're playing bass? How do you play when you're producing a...
I always say nobody ever pays me to play bass. They pay me to bring my equipment there and to take my equipment home. I enjoy playing bass. You don't never have to pay me to play. Part of playing is creating a safe place for risk. In a sense, to be able to play, you have to be able to, create safety so you can create risk. You can't create risk and hope they'll come up with safety. So if you can kind of give people tools, if you can say, one of my favorite trumpet players was Roy Hargrove, and there's a lot of more eloquent, whatevers, but driving with him was driving in an old Chevy that was always falling off the edge of the cliff. And sometimes he fell off the cliff. But at the end of the day, if you have a wonderful ensemble, they pick you up and they put you back on the road. But without knowing that that net exists underneath, you might not take that risk. So creating a safe space for risk. There's a composer named Butch Morris, who did, conductions, which are improvisations based on conducting. Worked with Oliver Lake and a bunch of other folk. Came to me once and said, I want to make this piece based on a German libretto. And in my head, I'm thinking, this is not going to be good. But the reality was, we figured out a way for him to do it. And it wasn't very good. But once that idea was out of his head and said, I learned from this, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, suddenly it opened up creativity all over the place. And suddenly 5 or 6 wonderful pieces flew out of it. So giving people the ability to risk and to follow passion will always result in passionate work.
In terms of, I don't want to call it taking a risk, but being more expansive in like what type of stuff you want to bring in and for what reason.
I think a lot of programming is putting things in the right space. I hate to say the stuff I'm most cautious about are the things that I'm most passionate about, because I will go beyond what sometimes I should. Once you start booking the things that are in your record collection, you have to talk to 3 other people and say, am I on the right road or not? Because there's nothing good about having 300 people show up for something in a 2,800 seat hall for the artist or anyone else. So where do you put it with the best chance of success? That's important. Does this belong at my venue? Meaning, or should I be partnering with 3 other community organizations or other presenters who know the Peruvian community better than I do? And, how do we partner to make it successful? About 40% of what we do here is not meant to be profitable at all. There are 2 P&Ls, profit and loss statements. There's mission and there's dollar profit. And the best programs deal with both. Some people will say to me, well, you're doing the New Edition show at the arena, or you're, whatever it might be. And goes, well, that's to make money for other things. I said, no, that's part of mission. It's just as much mission as doing Beethoven. Heck, they're alive. And in a sense, when people say, who sponsors my classical season? I say, Gilberto Santa Rosa and Snoop Dogg, because the profits of those make sure those other things go on, as they do the children's programs that we do. So there might be a tour like the Hip Hop Nutcracker, and highly profitable, but started out in the little theater, became multiple theaters, became a tour, sold it to PBS, got an Emmy, sold it to Disney Plus, and redid it again. But it turned into something that's profitable that funded lots of arts education programs. But one of them was a touring piece called Chado's Kitchen, which was the first bilingual touring event that I'm aware of dealing with food insecurity. And we made it so that everyone could afford it. It went to 52 different venues. Some people paid next to nothing, some people paid $1,000. And it toured the country. And that was cool with my P&L, because my goal initially had nothing to do with the for-profit P&L, had everything to do with the mission P&L. You start out with a goal. You start out with guidelines of this is what we're trying to do. Those things may change, but certain things are certainly not meant to make a profit, and that's why we're a not-for-profit organization. That's why we ask for donations. There are shows that, if you took every single dollar that came in, it didn't cover half of the expenses of that program. Kwanzaa is a big mission win, but we don't evaluate it from a dollar point of view because it's meant to be a mission win. Sounds of the City as well. They used to look at Sounds of the City and say, well, if we bring in these different acts, that'll make sure that they buy those similar acts when they come to NJPAC. The reality is, after like a year of looking at it, I said, it has nothing to do with that at all. It's for people to have a space, irregardless of if they ever buy a ticket to NJPAC, and it's free, and it's a communal thing, and you look at NJPAC as part of your home. And that's enough. It doesn't have to do 7 things. It can do 1 or 2 things well. Communal with your community, and realizing that NJPAC is part of the community, that alone's a win.
Yeah, it's something at that scale and that broad in terms of the types of art and performances that put on.
It's the same as anything else. I think it has scale, but it's for a festival like that, it's looking at your funders and seeing what they're trying to get out of it, and looking at your audiences, seeing what they're trying to get out of it, and finding where the intersection lies, and then trying to co-opt the artist to say, hey, there's a reason to do this festival. One of the best things about the festival is the money that goes to building healthy pantries and local food banks and food insecurity. So if I can say to an artist that, X amount of dollars from your show is going to help to feed people who need food, that's a good ask. First year we did it, we had too many causes. There was fentanyl, there was human trafficking, every time someone came in the door, we did something else, which is great. And I'm not saying anything is more important or less important than anything else, but it became a matter of how do we focus it. And that's where we landed on food insecurity, food pantries, and justice as it relates to healthcare in general, because it has that overlap. And we have a huge program at this point that's, we're touring the country with on arts and well-being. That linked to mission, it linked to a bunch of other things, but scale is, I've done 3 Super Bowl halftime shows. But probably my best Super Bowl thing that I do is every year I'm one of the producers on the Puppy Bowl on Animal Planet. Donate my fee, and I do the B-roll footage. When you see a puppy on the beach, this is Scruffy on the beach with a margarita, and he'll be playing in the second half, and he needs to be adopted. It's the same gig. You're still taping a television show, you're still whatever. After the Super Bowl, it has the best ratings that day in February, but all those dogs get adopted. So it's the same values, it's the same organization, it's the same creating a safe place to play. On all of these things, it's keeping drama on the stage and keeping it calm otherwise. It's fixing problems, and those problems, are so varying. I did Snoop Dogg's Tales from the Crypt tour right when Suge got out of jail, and I had to negotiate with the Latin Kings, the Bloods, and the Crips in every single market. That's a problem. You leave business school and you don't think, well, I'm going to have to learn to do this. But you walk in, you're sincere, you talk through problems, you talk through issues, you listen, and it's the same skill set. You're just being a bass player.
How do you view hospitality in what you
That's a broad term. Hospitality meaning food service, or hospitality in its generic form?
And taking care of people, whether it's people that you work with on staff here, whether it's acts that come in.
I think the issue is you lead with kindness. I remember my time at the Apollo. When you walk in the door of the Apollo, every person is greeted with, "Welcome to the Apollo Theater, where stars are born and legends are made." So suddenly you feel like you're jumping into a space that has both legacy and current relevance. How do we create that feeling for people walking into NJ Pack, or walking into our plaza, or walking into our arts education programs, whatever it is? How do we create that for artists walking in the back door? Because if you can create that, you can have discussions when problems occur. You know, we're going to go over, what do we do, blah, 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 you know? Particularly when you're juggling lots of different people. How do you, leading with kindness, but leading with purpose is always important.
And what do you tell while there are these various interests?
I have 5 departments that report to me, all the earned revenue for the institution, pretty much, except for capital. And first and foremost, we back each other up. I couldn't tell you the titles of most of the people who work for me, or with me. It's probably the better term. If they make a mistake, we back each other up. I may bring them into my office and say, "Hey, you should think about what just happened there." But that discussion will never happen in public. I have the same office manager, assistant, I don't even want to say administrative assistant, that I came when I got here. All of the VPs that I work with were people who were associates or directors. They've all moved up, and we trust each other. We have our back. We have each other's backs, and we're trying to grow together. And if we win on a show, we all win. If we lose on a show, we all lost. And it used to be that, you know, the programming department might program something, and they'd send it to marketing, and if it didn't sell, they would blame marketing. Well, it might have been a bad show. So a lot of my position is new in that it has production, touring, television, marketing, programming, reporting to it and saying, you know, whatever breaks down there, it's a shared win and it's a shared loss.
What delights you? What are you delightful to step into?
Playing bass delights me. Spending time with family delights me. Having my golden retriever wait for me at the door, no matter how late the gig is, it's pretty darn cool. You know, it's those experiences, seeing an artist have their vision be culminated, that makes me happy. The interesting thing as I leave is it took me a while to figure out that when I hear applause and I'm sitting backstage, that I'm part of that applause. And lately I've started looking at shows. And I wonder, as I produce less, will I get that same feeling? You know, leaving doesn't concern me, salaries don't concern me. Having that special feeling when there's a special moment, you say, I was part of that.